Hello everyone, Mr. Happy here, and in this video, I want to talk about a topic that has divided the player base of Final Fantasy XIV since 2013. And that topic is, should tanks and healers be worried about their DPS? Now TLDR, I will say that if you're looking at end game content, not just things like Bismarck and Ravana, but things like Savage Alexander, yes, I do feel it is important for tanks and healers to reach outside of their role and into what their job is fully capable of. Leveling up, I don't feel it's as important, especially while you're still learning everything about your role on that job. It's once you're really comfortable with your role, you know what you can do, reaching past that and learning more about what your job is fully capable of and unlocking its full potential. So that's my TLDR. Now with that out of the way, let's go on to the rambling about this topic. This topic's been a problem for 2 years now. Why all of a sudden am I making a video about it? Well, I got a question from this week's Mondays with Mr. Happy, and I've gotten questions like this a lot over the past 2 years, but it prompted me to really want to make a video about this topic. I'm going to read the question for you guys real quick and answer it in sort of a two-pronged way. So, the question is, hey Mr. Happy, first time posting, so I have a soldiery bonus. We'll talk about that later. I need advice about my static. Currently, we're on A3 Savage, and it's impossible for us to beat because we don't meet the DPS check. All of our DPS are usually above 1.1k on the first phase and 1k after, and tanks are usually around 700 plus, and we still don't meet the hand DPS check. The problem here is the white mage does not DPS at all in the first phase. He'd rather wait for something to hit us than DPSing and putting up arrows. He knows that we're wiping because the highest DPS from us is not enough. When we suggest DPSing to him, he goes, I'm a healer, I heal. You're a DPS, you DPS. Now, while I did answer this in Mondays with Mr. Happy, I will say that I would like to tackle your issue with Hand of Pain first. I don't think this is your healer's fault for not beating Hand of Pain specifically. If you told me that you were wiping to like 2 or 3% on Enrage, I think then I would look at the healer and be like, well, they could definitely be putting out more. But not meeting the hand DPS check, to be honest, a white mage generally solo heals that phase while the scholar is the one putting out all the DPS. And to facilitate that, you usually make sure that the white mage gets the damage reduction debuff when you have to pass for the digititis just beforehand. So I don't think that that's an issue with the white mage. You may want to look into the DPS and the tanks pulling out more. Maybe there's too much cleaving. Maybe you have a summoner who's baning. Maybe the death flares and the pain flares are too much. Maybe the Skogul is too much. Maybe there's just too much clipping of damage. Maybe players aren't switching to the hand that is, that is the higher health fast enough. And also, to be honest, 1.1k in the first phase, while that's a nice minimum, maybe your warrior should be just above 1.1. Generally, full-blown DPS should be at least above 1250, if not 1350 with the new weapons at that point. I mean, even without the weapons, it wasn't abnormal to be around the 1250 mark. So you may also want to look at that, because it could mean that just when it comes down to crunch time, your DPS aren't pulling their weight, or there's not enough a switch of how you're approaching the Hand of Pain. I mean, I'm playing an A3 Savage kill behind this right now. Hand of Pain, like I said, white mage solo heals. We all switch to the target. We have cooldowns available for it other than a potion, and we just decide to wreck it. Like, that's what we do. So that's one thing. Hopefully you watch this video because it'll explain a little bit more in detail about the second part that I'm about to answer right here. The mentality of, I'm a healer, I heal. You are a DPS, you DPS. I do not like this when you are talking about 8 people that are supposed to be working as a unit. That means that people need to be comfortable reaching outside of their comfort zone. They need to understand sometimes more is required of people, and it doesn't just come down to which roles are responsible for what. I mean, for example, A3 Savage, not completely abnormal to tank that without your tank stance ability on. It just takes some comfort from the healers and proper use of your cooldowns to be able to do such a thing. So this mentality of I'm a healer, I heal, you're a DPS, you DPS. Low levels, like I said, I feel that's acceptable because you're still learning your roles. At this point in Savage, though, that can no longer be a mentality, because I'd like to put things this way. It's really easy to do the minimum of what's expected for your role. It's really difficult to then reach outside of your role and into what your job is capable of. Let me explain what that means. As a tank and a healer, your role is to tank and heal. Those are your first priorities. Keep aggro off the DPS and the healers. Make sure that you don't die by using proper cooldowns. As a healer, make sure the party doesn't die to any mechanics that just deal unavoidable damage. Make sure the tank doesn't die to the boss. Things like that are basic, and you're given plenty of tools to do that. Now, you're also given tools to reach outside of that and then add more to the party. Be able to do some DPS, throw things away. Now, I will say in Savage, they didn't treat healers very, very well. If you want a DPS as a healer in Savage, you're almost forced into buying crafted accessories in order to have the accuracy to make sure you don't miss the boss. I will say that's unfortunate. It's something that I feel like is kind of lost in translation, and I can understand any sort of hesitation if you don't have access to those crafted accessories. A spell isn't worth anything if it misses. That's not DPS. It's wasted MP. Everything wrong with it. I get that. Tanks, given both of them, given a tank and a DPS stance. Of course, Dark Knights is more along the lines of just blood weapon, not as much a stance, but you know what I mean. They're given tools again to do additional DPS, as are the different healers. Now, I know that a lot of people like to look at the tank and healers and go, you need to do DPS. I would also like to draw some attention to DPS that just do the minimum of what their job is capable of and don't try to push themselves to the next level to maximize what their job is capable of. A DPS can just go through their combos all willy-nilly and not have to worry about a thing, sure. At least in certain more casual content. But when you're looking at Savage, you need to know, am I lining up my buffs with my dots? Am I using potions in order to pull additional damage? Don't get me wrong, tanks and healers can use potions to pull additional damage as well. Just want to clarify, I'm looking at DPS right now. Am I making use of all my off-global cooldown skills? Let's go to Ninja. Am I using Jugulate off cooldown? Am I using Dream Within a Dream off cooldown? Am I making sure to Trick Attack once a minute? Is my Huton falling off? Keeping track of all these things to make sure you're pulling everything that your job is capable of. And that really comes down to go to a dummy, practice at least your opener, then practice maintaining your DPS over the course of several minutes, then try to translate that into actual fight mechanics, which can be a difficult step for a lot of people, but it is something that I feel like if we're going to stress tanks and healers needing to do more DPS, I'd also like to stress DPS doing more DPS. And that comes down to, as soon as you hit 60, your first thought shouldn't be, I'm going into Bismarck Extreme. Your first thought should be, as a DPS, let me make sure I understand how to play my job. Let me go hit a dummy, play with the new skills that I got from 50 to 60, even play with some of the skills I may not have paid too much attention to back at level 50, and see if I can figure out what I need to do to make everything easier for me going forward. Make sure that the Bismarck DPS check isn't a problem. Make sure that Ravana is going to be something that we can kill quickly enough. Get through these expert dungeons even faster. It'll just make it so that people look at you and go, this guy knows what he's doing. And this dungeon is going fast because they know what they're doing. This Bismarck is going smooth because people know what they're doing. You're contributing to your party in a way that a lot of people seem to underappreciate. You're putting out more DPS. And as a DPS, that is your one job. Outside of doing any mechanics that may target you, that is the most important thing you can do. On top of that, utilizing the tools, goading a tank that's using a lot of TP, like a warrior in a party or something like that. Making sure not to just sit on your invigorates until you're almost out of TP. Making sure you're making use of things like Shadewalker and Smoke Screen as a ninja. Making sure you're maximizing Heavy Thrust and Blood of the Dragon on Dragoon. Making sure you're not dropping stacks, you're making use of Chakra as a monk. All of these things matter. And learning how to do them properly should be your first step as a DPS at 60. For tanks and healers, on the other hand, you probably won't get to practice this too much until you actually get into the fight itself. You can't just go practice DPS on dummy, because the DPS rotations, other than maybe a Warriors and a Dark Knights, are fairly straightforward. But the DPS has to do the same thing. They have to go and look at how to maximize DPS. If you're looking at A3 and A4 Savage, your tanks and your healers need to be capable. It is no longer, as soon as you join a static and you go into A3 Savage, if you go into any Savage, you no longer are expected to do the minimum. You're expected to do as much as you humanly can within your comfort zone, of course, to accomplish your goal of defeating the fight. And that's going to include healers putting out more DPS, healers being capable of solo healing certain small portions of the fight, understanding what spells you're going to need to use and when, and understanding, well, because I used all the spells, now I can do DPS for a few seconds, even if it just comes down to throwing out a Fluid Aura on the boss without Cleric Stance between your heals because you only have enough time for that. Those little things add up, and to me, if you are looking at Savage, especially A3 and eventually A4, you need to be comfortable reaching outside your role like this. I know a lot of people aren't going to like hearing me say that, but I have to beat it like a dead horse, like I have this whole video. A3 Savage, you absolutely need to be comfortable with doing this. Yes, there are times you won't be able to DPS, and if people yell at you for not DPSing, they don't know what they're talking about. If you have the damage down debuff, you're not DPSing. That's a waste. You're literally doing like 95% less damage. So that's a waste. But everything else you should be able to do, fights are all calculated. Calculated out, determine when you're capable of DPSing as these roles. And guess what? At the end of the day, guess what? You know how to play your job better. You don't just know your role, you know your job. And that is important when it comes to MMOs and progressing in end game content. If you end up not doing any DPS as a healer or tank in Ravana, or you're not going super stressed about it, no one's really going to beat you up for it, because those fights, they're easy enough. You know, it's like, whatever. 4-man dungeons, could it be faster if the healer was DPSing? Yeah. Could it also be faster if the DPS were doing better DPS? Of course. It's not making or breaking it. It's just, you got to look at everything around you, understand the situations, and understand when it's beneficial versus, well, risky, and too risky. So risky, in fact, that it's not even possible to do. Understanding your limits, always trying to transcend them. I feel that as a player, you can always impress people more. And by playing your job super correctly, putting out that extra numbers, you'll definitely be able to impress people. And get those 3,000 commendations for that fat chocobo with a hat. Anyway, thank you for watching this video. Let me, well, share your thoughts under the video. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of hatred towards this from the people who don't want to reach outside their role at all. So apologies ahead of time. I just had to speak my mind about it as someone who's been doing end game content since the beginning. I feel like I have to finally make a video where I put my foot down and say, if you're going into that kind of content, it's no longer just about you. It's about everyone, and everyone being willing to contribute as much as possible to the kill. So thank you for watching. Again, leave your comments in the comment section below the video. Try to have some civil discussions, even though I know this is going to be a disastrously bad video in the comment section. Anyway, thank you for watching. I will see you all next time, and until then, take care.